So your environment will be consistent, right? And with that also you'll get a version control. You can maintain versions. If you already know about Git, right, you can store all your infrastructures in a Git repository. You can maintain version control, source control, and this also does multi-cloud support and also other tools also, not just only cloud. If you heard about Kubernetes, Datadog, this all can be automated using Terraform. Okay. So the key concept today we're going to run through only key concept of the Terraform, okay, and just one or two examples, and then next week we can do deep dive into the more into models, interpolations, okay, and the way of working in the corporate network, okay. So if you start using Terraform, you'll come across these are the key concepts, the key terminologies in the Terraform: provider, resources, data, variables, locals, outputs, and state file. There are other more are there, but these are most important. Okay. So let's run through one by one, like what is provider does, right? So provider is just like authentication mechanism for your like here it is I'm taking as a AWS, Azure, GCP, but throughout my training I'm gonna cover only AWS. Okay, but this same tool can be used for other clouds. So provider will instruct the Terraform to connect to so which cloud here. If you look at the example, right? So I put a provider example, say provider AWS, connect to AWS cloud, right? And then reason but get into the jump into the reason US East 1, right? So the way you do in AWS, if you use AWS when you log in, right, what you do first thing you set your reason, right? So that's where you provision the resources. So this is what it does, okay. So similarly you can do it Kubernetes. Similarly you can do use for Datadog. If any using any Splunk tools, any monitoring tools, any AI tools also can be automated using Terraform, okay. So provider is the entry point. So the next one is resources. Okay, this is most important, right? So Terraform does support there are two methods. One is resource and data. Okay, so resource is nothing but it say what exact resource, what exact infrastructure component to be created, right? So if you look at the example here, right? So it says resource AWS underscore instance means it's going to create EC2 instance. Okay. And this is your just a unique name of your this method. Okay. If you have the two resource in the same, like resource AWS instance, right? You can give different, you have to give unique name. So this is just for your reference. But this method can be easily get it from the Terraform registry, which I'm going to show it in the end of this presentation. Okay. Then which each this method, right? Resource has the functions. It's called a functions, right? Functions has certain parameter to be passed. Okay. So AMI required. What is AMI interpreted? What is the instance type? So if you run this, it will create a AWS EC2 instance. Okay. So this block, it is called as HCL, HashiCorp Corporation Language. Okay. So the next one is data block. I just did mention data block in the previous slide. Okay. So the most frequently used data block also. So data is nothing but you're just going to discover the resources based on the parameter you passed, right? It's basically go get in connected to AWS and say get this resource ID so that you can refer into some other in the resource block, right? So if you look at here, in the example, this is a data block. This is a resource block. So I did cover resource block, right? I'm creating here EC2 instances. Okay. In data block, how it's going to useful. So for example, let's say go back to here, right? You say here AMI, you have been hard coded, right? So this one, it will be hard code. If you want to come back, like if in the new AMI released, you have to come back and change this value, right? So it's easy way you can discover latest AMI image based on the filter you put, right? So what this block provides, data blocks discover the Amazon Linux AMI details based on the parameter. Say most recent equal to true. Get the AMI if it should be most recent. It should be owner as the Amazon, and filter name and values. Name should follow this, right? So based on these filters, so it fetch all the AMI details, right? So then in your resource block you can straight away refer it, right? So every time you run, if any latest AMI released, then what will happen? That will get updated, and your instance will get recreated because the AMI ID changed. Okay. So the one is resource block is to create resource, data block is to discover the resource or details. Okay, that's a difference. So next is variable. Okay, so here if you go back to the first Terra resource block, right? So you have the, like, this one is, we anyway we replaced with data block, right? We are going to discover the latest AMI. And instance type T2 micro, right? Sometimes you might need T2 micro, sometimes you need a different instance type. So I don't want to hard code, I want to variabilized, right? So that's where you use variable block. Okay, you can see here, right? Variable instance type. Okay, so I say description EC2 instance, type is string, and default is T2 micro. Means if you don't pass this variable during runtime, it will take default value, but you can overwrite also this value. So what will happen in your resource block, instead of hard coding value, you can just simply go instance type equal to var dot instance type. Okay, then next one is locals. Okay, so sometimes you use locals also. So where you use locals, locals you use when you have repeatedly using multiple and not variables. Okay. And also you want to compute that value, right, during runtime. You're not going to pass that value, right? You will you will build that value, the value during runtime. That is called local to that particular, what you say, like, that module or session. Okay. So if you take example here, right? So let's go back to our example. Okay. The resource block, right? A resource block has tags, name equal to web server. It might have a many more tags, right? Cost center equal to some, project ID is equal to some something else, right? So that in the tag will be referred like everywhere across to your Terraform script, right? You don't need to write multiple times that value. You simply define that local comment on tags and put all the values in that and simply just refer it, right? And also, for example, let's say you want to give the instance name here, right? Instance name you want to construct during runtime. How? Pass the resource prefix plus, then after that you join the environment variable. After that you add the count variable, right? So that is, you can't, you won't, you shouldn't able, you don't need to pass it because already you're getting environment variable name and the resource prefix. You can construct using local variable. Okay, so that I'm going to show in the live after this completing this presentation. Okay. Yeah. So the next most important is the state file. Okay. Okay. How Terraform, like, if you attend any Terraform like trainings, or if you might have heard from the your colleagues, right? Terraform will only make change if you change any of their code, right? If it's already matching your infrastructure code to the existing resource, it doesn't create. So how it maintained, right? How it identified. So it's created that particular resource that is using a state. So it maintain a state file, nothing but it maintain a database. So it will compare, okay, this is a code I put. So once already it's been executed, it's already created a resources. So that resource state captured in that state file. Okay. So it compare, like, for example, if you just go back to this instance, right? Resource block. So here you, sorry, sorry, yeah, yeah. Here you created this block, you run the Terraform apply command, it's created an instance, right? Again, you rerun this Terraform apply. It say nothing to make change. How it say nothing to make change? Because it maintain a state file, right? Where it says, oh, last time this has been executed, and this time you're trying to execute again, but it's already the resource matching, right, to with your code. So it won't create again. So for example, let's say if I change instance type equal to T3 medium, right? So in that case, what happened? So it identified there's a difference, right? Your infrastructure as a code says the different instance type, but the last time what it's created is a different. So how it identify? It will refer the state file, right? Then it try to recreate. Okay. So I'm going to show it again, like at the end of the presentation. Okay, we can do the live example. So that is a state file. Okay. So the next one is Terraform. Sorry, Terraform. Like the commands, like it's not the, sorry, it's not the, it's just a workflow. It's not the Terraform file structure. Okay. Just to change the heading, it should be Terraform workflow. Means like basic the commands. Okay. So when you do Terraform coding, first you run Terraform for FMT. FMT means it format your Terraform code. You just take out unnecessary space, arrange your code. Okay. So that what it does. It's just like a formatting your code. Okay. Next one is we sometimes you use Terraform validate. Okay. So Terraform validate, just validate your code, whether it is in the right syntax or not. Is there any errors? Right. Validate, it does the validation. Right. So these format and validation may not required every time. If you use Visual Studio Code as a your editor, right? So IDE, you don't need, like, you can install plugins, right? Even if IntelliJ and any other tools if you use, you can just configure the plugins. They, like, those plugins do this all the jobs automatically. Okay. So I'm going to show that also in the demo. Okay. So the first command you always run before you apply is Terraform init. That's our initialization. So that does the, like, download all the required provider. So, and the Terraform plan will compare your code with the actual infrastructure, right? It will give you what and all it's going to create. Okay. Terraform applies, that's what it's apply the, like, it create the infrastructure based on your code. Okay. So Terraform destroy, it's going to destroy whatever you created. Okay. So the Terraform apply destroy is more powerful. So it will, that is, it will ask whenever you run it, it will ask for confirmation. Okay. So yes, as explaining, right? So benefit of infrastructure as code also, right? So if I asked you to create 100 resources manually, you'll create it. If I asked you to clean up, it's very hard. You have to go note down everything and clean up, right? If you have Terraform like infrastructure as a code, it's just one click button to apply, one click button to destroy. It will clean up everything. Okay. So next other commands we have like Terraform import that I'm going to show live demo later. It basically, you have written a code to create, so let's say you have written a code to create S3 bucket, but S3 bucket already exists. Someone created manually, right? You want to match the state. So you don't want to Terraform to create again. Even if you run Terraform apply, try to run Terraform, it's complain that it's already exists, right? How to troubleshoot that? Either you can delete that resource manually. Basically nobody does in the corporate network, because it's once resource created, there are many more data already there, right? So you can import that resource block into Terraform state, so that Terraform will identify it and it won't recreate again, right? So Terraform state list, sorry, it's not import. So Terraform state list means it will list all the database, what it has been created, what is the database it hold. Okay. And Terraform RM means is going to remove it if you don't want to Terraform to delete it, but you want to keep resource, but you want to take out from the state, that use the Terraform remove. Okay. So if these are might be going overhead, don't worry. When I start giving demo, I'll also switch between the presentation and give you the demo. Okay. So the next one, this one is Terraform file structure. Okay. So if you do Terraform, usually these are the files, but it doesn't matter. Like the file name has to be main.tf, variable.tf. What matters? What matters is the concept we covered, right? Variable block, resource block, right? Even you can put file name as whatever 123.tf. So what matters is .tf, right? So file name extension has to be tf. So when you run Terraform init or plan, it will read all the tf files, and then accordingly it will provision. Okay. So these are the main.tf. Usually you just arranging your code accordingly. Main.tf, where you add all the resource block, where you want to create resources. Variables, you add variable blocks. And output is where, like, once Terraform is provisioned, you need to print certain output into the your console. You use the output block. So that I'm going to show it in the demo. Okay. Provider, as I said, it's just the way of connecting to the endpoint. So you can maintain a separate provider.tf, and terraform.tfr is the additional variables. So that's, you don't worry about Terraform TFRs. That's gonna, I'm gonna cover it in the next consecutive trainings. Okay. So that's all about the presentation. So now I'm gonna show the live demo. Okay. Okay, this is the Visual Studio Code, right? I was talking about Terraform format and the validation, right? So if you install plugins, so here I install the format plugin so that it automatically does the format. It is called, I think, a black formatter. Yeah, you can see here. It does the Python formatting. I think Terraform one. Uh, so the formatter should be, I think, format on save. Probably that is the, yeah, format on autosave. That does the format automatically. Okay. The next one, you can install Terraform plugin. So that does the validation. Okay. It just straight away give you the error if you return any wrong function. Okay. So let's connect to any one of my repository. Um, okay. Yeah, I'm gonna create the one folder called eh, Terraform training one. Okay. This terminal. Okay. So I'm gonna open this folder alone. Open the folder so that I don't want to see all the other folders. Okay. Let me see. First thing, I just log into AWS console, sign in. Okay. I think I log in as a root. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to provision in the Europe, like London region. Okay. So right now I've connected to manually, right? So how do you connect through Terraform, right? So remember explaining about the provider block, right? Let's create the first one. So I'll just create a file called provider.tf. This name can be anything, right? Okay. So what matters is the block you mentioned, right? Let's put provider.tf. So, and also the extension. Okay. So here, so I want this to connect to my AWS account, right? So how do you do that? Use a provider block. Okay. Then AWS. Okay. So then you say which region needs to connect. So if you install Terraform plugin, that's how it will auto-populate all the parameters, right? But if it doesn't auto-populate, how to get, if there's a Terraform documentation, you can go Terraform registry, go to Terraform registry, right? Here you can see all the browse the provider, right? There are many providers available, right? It also, you can see here it support many more. Or you can automate all these services, all the cloud provider, all the tools using Terraform, right? Right now we are just using the like AWS for this training. So I just use AWS, right? So this will, and also the better to say documentation, just go to Terraform documentation. Yeah, just type AWS. Okay. Yeah. So this one, I'm gonna put it in my YouTube channel where you can see he explain like they given you 10-minute session, 3 minutes video. You can refer this also how to install and everything. Okay. So this is also most important. Let's keep it. Just want to see provider, Terraform AWS provider, right? So if you click on this, you can see AWS provider documentation link. I think this one. Yeah, here you can refer, right? So provider name is AWS, and you can put alias if you're maintaining multiple provider. Let's not worry about that. So I just connecting to AWS, right? So you'll get the AWS provider like the syntax, everything from this example. Okay, you can refer the documentation. This one, see here, they given you the AWS provider and with the what reason you're connecting. Okay, and apart from this, right, what I mentioned, other than this reason, right? So just put this reason, US2. Then you also can mention the AWS secret, like secret ID access key here also. So that's how it will, your Terraform read this and connect it. But that's not the best practices. Okay, you shouldn't store any of your secrets or credential in the in infrastructure as a code, right? So that is why I'm not putting anything here. Otherwise, you can put the AWS secrets. I think. Let me. I think exact syntax. It will somewhere come here. If you just put provider, somewhere you get it AWS provider, right? Yeah, you can do more research. That's what here you can pass all the secrets and access key, but in corporate we don't do that. Okay. So how it will connect to your console? How it knows which AWS account needs to connect? That is using the credential you pass it during runtime. Okay. So how I do it here? I just use the open the terminal. Okay. Okay. So I pass it using the environment variable, export AWS secret key, and that's environment variable. Let's get the environment variable for the passing the secrets. Okay. Environment variable credential, right? If you search it, you will get the all the credential. Okay. So I'm gonna copy this one. Okay. Then I'll pass it here. I'm just temporarily storing here. Okay. Empty. So these are the commands to pass. Pass the AWS credential. Okay. Yeah. So right now, I don't think so. I have any credential. I'm going to create a credential now, right? If you go to IAM, let's create a one user, automated user. Okay. I'll just say, I think I have one user. Yeah, Sid. Okay. Or you can create a user. You can give whatever the permissions over here, right? So then if you go to security credentials, so that's where you can generate a access key and a secret key. Okay. So right now, for just training purpose, I'm gonna generate it. Okay. I'll say I'm gonna use it for the automation. It's a command line interface. Okay. So understand the recommendation, click next, then click create access key, right? So this is my access key, copy that access key, okay? And then the secret key, okay? So make sure you shouldn't share this secret key access key to anybody. So if you share it, then they can connect your AWS console, AWS account and provision the resources, okay? So anyway, I've created for training purpose. I'm going to delete it after this, okay? So no, I want to connect to the EU West 2. That is my London region, okay? So let's pass this as a not variable, okay? So now it is I've connected to my AWS console. How to check? It is a simple AWS CLI command, AWS STS get caller identity. It says which account I connected with what role. Okay. See it. I connected as a SID user. This is my account. Okay. If you go back to C and see my account ID, that matches the account ID, right? Done. Continue. Okay. So let's go back to our AWS. So no, we don't no longer this one. We already exported. I just delete it after the this training. Okay. So we added a provider block. Okay. So this a non-variable will give authentication. So this provider block say way to connect. Okay. Is it AWS or Azure or which reason? Okay. So what was the next block we are doing it? We covered in presentation. It is called resource block. Let's create another one. So the file called main.tf. Okay. So in main.tf, let's go back to see is there any VPC I have. If I have VPC, I can gonna create the EC2 instance. Okay. Otherwise, I'll take a different example. S3 bucket one. Okay. Yes. Yeah. I have VPC. You can see here. Okay. So let's create a EC2 instance. How to create EC2 instance? What are the resource block? First, you need a resource function. Okay. Then you need a actual, sorry, resource is a method. You need a function name to create a AWS EC2 instance. Since I've installed Terraform plugin, it will display all the functions here. If you start typing like stop browsing it, AWS underscore instance, right? It automatically will get the resource block, right? But nobody knows all the parameter, what parameter need to be passed. Even though I have the 10 years of experience, I know few parameters on my head, but I don't know all the parameters, right? So in that case, you go to the Terraform documentation, right? So just type Terraform AWS EC2 instance. Just type this word, it will give you the method. See here, AWS instance, right? So when you click on, it gives the complete AWS, all the AWS methods and examples here. Okay. So what we're trying to connect, we're trying to create the AWS EC2 instance, right? So this is the method. So here, if you scroll down, they give examples here how to connect it. If you scroll down, they will give you the parameter which are required to consume this function, right? So argument reference is the one which is where you can pass all the parameter to create EC2 instance, right? So nobody even knows all the parameters on their head. So we'll come back and check. Okay. So let's say if you want to create AWS Institute, you can see you need a AMI, right? AMI used for instance to create. Okay. And you have the EBS block to create EBS values. You can go through all these parameters. I'm not going to cover each and every parameter of this function, but this is how I do, right? So I'll come back, I'll go to Terraform documentation and try to see what are the parameters are there. Is that parameter like required for my like the my service creation process, service creation process? I'll take that parameter and pass the value, right? So if you go, it will take the IAM instance profile. There's so many parameters, right? So these attribute argument reference means, so in order to use this, you need to pass some arguments here, right? So if you go to the argument, it will say whether it is mandatory or not, right? If it is mandatory, you have to pass it, right? So reason is not mandatory, AMI is not mandatory, right? So certain things are not mandatory, okay? So right now, and apart from argument reference, you have the another section. If you scroll down, is called attribute reference. Attribute reference is nothing but uh, yeah. Yeah. So if you see attribute reference, when you run this function, that's what it give the output. Okay, I'm going to show you the that example also. Okay, so right now let's create the simple AWS instance. Okay, so I'm going to use the simple block. Let's say I'm not going to create VPC setter block. It's already created. Okay, this is how you create AWS VPC. Okay, so I'm going to create the straight away instance. Let's copy this block, put it over here. Okay, so I don't want anything right now. Just take it out everything. Just I put this information. My block is ready, right? So let's run the Terraform, right? You know when I was explaining Terraform workflow, right? What is the first command you run is Terraform format, right? So let's go into the folder. You need to go get into the folder. I think already I'm under the, if I do present data, I'm already there. First command you run Terraform FMT means it just basically does the format. So for example, let's say I've given this one, right? Automatically it is a formatting because I have a plugin. If you don't have plugin, you need to run this. So next one is Terraform validation, right? So Terraform validate. So it say there is some issue, right? Requires AWS, but provider is not available. Okay. I think there's some provider sanction is wrong. Okay, it should be there, right? Yeah. Okay. So you do the first Terraform install, Terraform init, because that is required before Terraform validation. So which will download all the required the plugins. If you see here, you mentioned Terraform provider as AWS, right? It's downloading AWS provider, okay, for Terraform to run. So that's the first step, right? So then you do the Terraform validation. You can say it's success. Means your configuration is right, valid. Okay. Let me clear it. I've done the Terraform init. That's you always you run, before run the Terraform applier plan. Okay. So next Terraform plan. Terraform plan, what it does, it compare your infrastructure code with AWS account, say what it's going to create, what it's going to make changes, right? Let's run Terraform plan. So there's something wrong in my provider. Okay, there is no UES, it is U. Okay. Save it. Run the Terraform plan again. Yeah. Did you see? It's going to create one to add, means it's going to create AWS EC2 instance, right? So let's run this one, Terraform apply. Apply is the actual command which is going to create the EC2 instance. Okay. So it asks for confirmation. I say yes to create. Okay. It says this AMI ID does not exist. Means so if you go back to your AMI, this does not exist. So that's where we use data block to auto discover. Otherwise, you have to go to AWS console. You can add you can find the AMI yourself and you can add it. Okay. EC2. Let's go to EC2. Right. Let's say if I just launch instance there, I can get the AMI ID. Okay. Or you can find the AMI ID section. There also you can find the AMI ID. Okay. Yeah, Amazon Linux, you can see I'm going to pick up this AMI ID, right? Let's go back to your code. Just put this, save it, and now you run the Terraform apply. Click yes. Uh, yeah, you need VPC ID and other. I don't have any default VPC, right? So I'm gonna give the VPC details. Okay. So if you have default VPC, you don't need to pass automatic detect. But if you see here, um, here also you can pass the you can check the attribute argument reference like VPC, right? You need a basically subnet, right? When you create when you launch this EC2 instance, right? You pass all the parameters. You selected which type, right? So then you go down and select the network under settings. You select the VPC ID, right? Let me select this one only. Here we have everything. I just put VPC ID. I think, sorry, I need a subnet ID here. Subnet ID equal to this the one I pass it. Okay. Yeah, that's enough. I think subnet is enough. Just run the Terraform apply again. Click yes. Yeah, it started creating. If you go to your EC2 dashboard, you'll see the instance getting created. See, it's pending. It's still provisioning. Okay. So this one is creating your AWS EC2 instance through infrastructure as a code. See, it's done, right? So if you refresh, instance is created, right? So like if I want to run again, right? Let's clear this. Yeah, I run again Terraform apply. It says nothing to make change. It say there's no difference between your code and the actual resource. It will not make change. Can you see here? Zero added, zero change, zero destroyed. Even if you run Terraform plan, also it says nothing to make any changes. So how it identified it's already created, right? That is required Terraform state. Okay. So this is a file it creates locally here, right? No, my state file, I'm instructing this Terraform like the code to store a state in locally, but state can be stored in remotely also. There are many more method available, so that I'm going to cover in the next training. But right now, just like stick to the local state file and then do that. Let's say if I delete this, right? If I delete this state, right? Or let me rename it something else. What will happen? You basically broke the it's a state file. If you run the Terraform plan again, it will detect, okay, oh, so I need to recreate again because it lost its state, right? Okay, so let me put this back again. Let me rename back. Okay. So I restored the state back. So when I run plan, it say nothing, there's nothing to add. Okay. Yes. So now let's say I'm going to make some changes here. Okay. So I'll say I'm going to add tag. Okay. Tags. Then I add a name of this EC2 instance equal to Sidhu test. Okay. So now I made a change in my code, but this does not exist at the remote side. Means AWS console does not exist. So if you run Terraform plan, it shows, yeah, there's something to make a change. It's a what change is gonna make. See, it says it's gonna just add only tag value. Okay. So this does not require to destroy and recreate. Okay. So if you go back to my console, you can see this machine, right? Let me rerun this one Terraform apply. Click yes, done, right? If you just refresh the page, you got it Sidhu test, right? So this is how the Terraform works. It just uses its state file to compare the your code versus the actual resources. If any difference, it will try to recreate. Okay. So the next one is data block. Okay, I'm gonna cover the data block now. So before that, let me destroy. Means I want to destroy this, right? Okay, one more thing I want to cover before that, right? Let's say if I asked you to create 100 EC2 instance, right? So you don't need to duplicate this block, and even if asked to manually create, it will take 1 or 2 days, right? So what you do, so like we can add a count here, okay? Let's say count equal to, I'll just add as right now, I'll just add as a 10 instead of 100, okay? So this block run 10 times. Let's run this one, okay? And then I want to give the name block as an increment, right? How to give, it's there is a syntax. I'm going to cover more advanced in the next consecutive. This is how you add count dot index. Okay. If I run Terraform plan, see, it's going to create 9 to add, means 9 EC2 it's going to create. Okay. So let me create also Terraform apply. I'll just say yes, confirm. See, it's creating all these instances. If you go back to your dashboard, just see that connected, refresh it, you can see all from 0 to 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. It create all the 10 instances. Okay. So let it complete. Then we can run the destroy command. Still it's creating. Okay. It's all done, right? So I want to destroy it, right? So once your work is done, just run Terraform, destroy. Yes, right? I give an yes command. So just refresh it. It starts shutting down. You can see here. Then it will terminate. Okay. So this is how the Terraform plan, apply, destroy, and Terraform init. These are the most important, like the Terraform commands we use. Okay. So next one, data block, right? So data block, I explained, I don't want to hard code this value. I want to discover, use a data block. So even if you go to Terraform registry documentation, so they also use data block here. You can see somewhere if you go top, they say detect this AMI, right? Based on this parameter and pass it here, right? So I just copy paste this data block, and and one more important, I just want to mention, you don't need to remember all this syntax. Okay, when you start working also, so either you can use Terraform plugin to auto populate the values, or you can use some AI integration, Chart GPT or anything else like Copilot to auto populate all this, then change it, right? Values. So what you should know, how to arrange your code, and what and all the logic, interpolation, for loop need to be used, how to normalize the variables. So this comes on the experience. Okay. So this one, if you put a data block, so I'm not hard coding any the value. What I do, I'll just put a data block. Here I said, right, file name doesn't matter. I'll change this set as a site.tf. Okay. So that I can dump provider and data block in the same file. So I use this one data block to discover the Ubuntu. I just refer it. How do you refer it? Just take out this one. Okay, put data, start discovering data. That's the method I used, aws.emi.ubuntu. See, if you go back to site dot data, function name, and the data function name, right? So go back, that's you said use Ubuntu dot, you need to use ID here, right? So if you type, it will automatically display here if you use Terraform plugin. Okay. So instead of count one, I just put count two to create two instances. Okay. So clear it. So go back to your console and see is there any still the EC2 instance are there or not. Okay. Nothing is there, right? It's all terminated. Okay. So now I'm going to run the Terraform init again here. Okay. Then I run the Terraform apply. Right. It's two resources going to create. Click yes. Okay. If you go back to your dashboard, you can see the pending instance. Two instances are coming up. Okay. You can put filter also, like it's a state, instance state equals to only running. Okay. So then it will automatically two instances come up. Okay. So go back, it is done. Okay. So that's what I explained. Data block you mentioned, UDDC are not hard coded. Okay. You can discover, auto discover all the resources in the within AWS. Okay. So next one, I was referring the output. Let's say I want output. You should I want to display the instance IDs, right? So how do you mention? Just say value. What is the value I want? I want value from like value from this block, output from this block, right? So what is this function name is AWS instance. Just type AWS underscore instance, right? Sorry, just copy this one, copy AWS instance here. Oh, okay. AWS underscore instance dot example automatically came, right? So example came, then I want IDs, right? Dot ID, right? That's all mentioned. So when I run, I will see the output instance ID here in the console. Okay, let's run it. So if you run Terraform, apply again, it's not going to create because already it has a state. It says that already created. It's just going to print the outputs. Yeah, because this one doesn't work because it has the count. So you have to mention star means get all the IDs. Okay. So just run it again. See, it's not going to create EC2 instance, but it says it's going to print the instance IDs. Click yes. So these are the instance ID created. That's how you use output block to output. So for example, you're deploying a service on ECS, like Elastic Container Service. Once it's deployed, so in console, you should print what is the URL to access that service, right? So that's how you can generate output. Okay. So the next comes is the locals, right? Locals, you need to use a locals box to define. Okay. So for example, let's say I want to construct this name. Okay. So how do you construct this name? Like you just say name equal to, right? So I just want to user to pass its own name. I just say variable, right? I need to define a variable. I'm going to define the variable file here. Okay. Variables.tf. Okay. I just say variable environment. Okay. I just say description. You put description equal to pass the environment name to create resource. Okay. So what is the type? It should be type should be string. There are other types also supported. I'm going to cover it in the next training. Okay. Then the default, if don't pass it during runtime, you can just default equal to I say dev environment. Okay. And then I also ask user to pass their own name, right? Variable, say resource name, right? I just copy paste the same type of variable it is. Let's say pass the resource name to create. So I'm not going to put any default value. If you don't put default value, you have to pass it. Okay. So in my main, I just use those variable, right? How to use variable? You say, you give the double colon because you're concatenating two variables. So it has to be within the do double quote, right? So here you just put dollar within curly bracket, just say var dot. I want to first concatenate resource name, and then with hyphen, then I want to concatenate the environment name dot var dot environment, right? So that then you can use. So I'll just remove this count two. I just print only one. Okay. I just pass this variable, right? If you're not referring multiple variable name here, right? You don't need to give the double colon and dollar flower bracket at all. Just directly mention the variable name. Here I want to mention the local variable name. So how do you mention local variable name? Local dot the name, right? I want to put this variable name here. That is how you use the local variable name. Okay. So let's say I'm going to remove the star because there is no count there. So I'm going to run this command, but it will fail because you need to pass this variable. Otherwise, it will say, please pass this variable. It will fail, right? So, but still, I'm going to run it. Okay, Terraform init, then Terraform plan. See, it's either it will pop up the to pass the variable. So I'm going to pass the variable called um, pinatum, right? So let's say pinatum. That's a variable name I passed. What it does, it's going to delete the one instance. Remember, initially we added two instances, right? So no, we change, remove the count, and then we pass other inert variable, right? So it's going to delete one and keep the create the new one. Okay, keep the one here. Okay, see here it is. It's deleting this one, keeping the one. It means one to change and one to destroy. What is one to change? It's just changing a tag name. Okay. Say tag name Sidhu test02, it will just add pinatum dev. So if you go back to your main, so this name is coming from local variable. That's where you use local variable, right? So run Terraform apply. I just give the name pinatum again. Click yes. Okay. So what it is going to destroy because we remove the count value. So go back to your AWS, just refresh the page, it's gone. It added the new name also, right? So what we covered locals. Locals is used for local variable within this block. This variable is you can pass it during runtime. So if you already default is there, it won't ask. But if you want to override, you simply do Terraform apply. You just say I think var. I think it's how do you pass the variable? Terraform runtime variable, right? Uh, so they give an example here. Yeah, you just pass dot var. Okay. So then the key and value. So for example, you just go var, then you say environment name, environment equal to prod. Okay. What it does, it's just going to change the name, right? So it's still, oh, resource name we haven't passed, right? So it will ask, or even you can pass resource name. How do you pass multiple resource name? Just use Terraform environment var, then again use one more var, just say resource name, right? Equals to GitHub. Okay, I'm just giving a different name. You didn't ask, right? Because it's read the variable name. Since I changed from environment dev to prod, it's going to change the value entire. Even resource name change to GitHub. It's going to change this value to GitHub prod. right? If you pass, click yes. So if you go back to the console, you can see the different name, right? So this is the variable. Okay. So I think that's all about today's Terraform training. I'm going to publish this video into the YouTube channel and then I'll send you the link also. Okay. So if you go back to just to conclude the presentation, right? So just go quickly, scan through the presentation, right? So we covered the provider. Provider is used to connect which AWS, which cloud, and which AWS account. Like if you use AWS, you'd say which AWS account. Similarly, you can connect Azure and GCP. Okay. Resource is to create actual resource in the AWS. It might be instance, it might be S3 bucket, it might be anything else. Okay. Even you can use Terraform to create IAM users, IAM roles. Okay. And data is to discover the like the existing resource and then refer it. Okay. Variable is the like you can give variable so that user can input the variable to the your code. They can pass during runtime the way we passed environment name and resource block. Okay. Locals, you just like compute the variables, it's values during runtime. Means Terraform does itself. It's called local to that block. It's called local. That is, it's called local variable. Okay. State file. So I explained state file. What is state file? But this session I just covered only a local state file. But in corporate network, you never do local state file. Either they used Terraform Enterprise Workspace, or they use the S3 bucket, or use any other like the console also you can use. Okay, there are many more options available. Okay. So the next one is workflow we covered: format, validate, init, plan, apply, destroy. Important state we couldn't able to cover. We'll cover in the next sessions. So these are the Terraform file structure usually, but the file name doesn't matter. What matters within the what you put it in the that particular file, and file name should have extension .tf. Then only Terraform detect those files, then provision, right? So that's all about today's. And let me stop the record. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. Okay. Let me stop recording first.